My name is Ann Harris. I have the pleasure of being Mary's second mentor, which in the peculiar way that we do these things at Seton Hill, that makes me her first reader. Will, who was her first mentor, is her second reader. So it falls to me to introduce Mary. And you know, I don't have that much to say because she was such a good student. You know, it's the ones who do their work, you know, and apply the criticism, and you know, things progressed, things went smoothly. So what I have to say is that her enthusiasm and hard work made mentoring her easy. Even when we realized that she had a major plot hole in the novel. So there was that. Yeah. There was the meeting where we realized that there was a major plot hole in the story. And she only showed mild signs of distress.
What meeting were you at?
Well, you put on a good front anyway.
What's that?
Yeah. And more importantly, she came up with a solution that made the book even better. I'm going to miss Mary's tale of love, duty, magical swords, evil kings, and winged horses. But most of all, I'll miss Mary's sense of humor and her hard work and positive attitude. These, along with her imagination and strong descriptive skills, will stand her in good stead in the years to come as she pursues what I hope will be a prolific writing career. Everybody, Mary DeSantis.
All right, well, thank you for that glowing introduction, Anne, and thank you all for being here. You don't know how much it means to me that you're taking the time at 8 p.m. to be here. So before I start, I'm going to do that thank you people thing because that seems to be a trend. I need to thank these two because, oh my God, I don't know where I would be right now if not for you two. And I have presents for you because I'm a wonderful mentee. And Will, yours is sharp, so be careful. Don't throw it at me. And yours, okay, so I'll explain these just really, really briefly. My favorite line of feedback from Will ever was in the part of the book, the 40,000 words that I completely cut, because, you know, why not? Let's cut 40,000 words. And Will had said about those magic swords that Anne was referring to, you know, I'm really glad that you had, you know, your protagonist stand up to your villain and have her, quote, fry his ass with the spell blade. So I got Will a sword. So he can, it's a letter opener, so now he can fry all the letters' asses when he opens them. I'm sure that will keep you entertained.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And Anne's insistent comment throughout was, I want more Pegasus. So I'm a Pegasus.
Oh.
Okay. You're welcome. So that's that. Where else? Okay. I need to thank these other people in the front row. These are my parents, and I thank you for like letting me be a bum and live at your house and do my master's degree because you're okay. Thank you for showing infinite patience when I would run out of my room going, I can't finish my thesis.
A daily occurrence, by the way.
Yeah. Okay. Wow, this is the wrong.
We love you.
This is the wrong piece of paper. And thank you to all of my critique partners, every single one of them. Daniel, Jeff, Tanya, Lauren, Kaylin, Jenny, Amy, and a double shout out to Amy who, while starting a new project, finishing revising her thesis, read my entire thesis from start to finish this past semester, and good God, girl, I couldn't have done it without you. So, that aside, here's the right piece of paper. Okay, that'll help. So, as Anne said, it's a story. My thesis titled Saving Adalia, and Adalia is the kingdom where it takes place, is an epic fantasy about a girl, a young woman who risks everything she has and everything she is to protect her father from a secret she's forced him to keep for over half her life. And when I sat down at my first mentor meeting with Will, he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I have this fantasy project that has flying horses and family betrayal and a really jealous girl." And he said, "Okay." And I said, "Okay." And oddly enough, those 3 things are probably the only 3 things that have not changed in the last 2.5 years. So I like to think of the fantasy genre as a very wide open type of thing. And one of the things I was really adamant about throughout this whole process was that I did not want a lot of magic. I wanted the bare minimum of magic, and I wanted all of my characters, or at least most of my characters, not to have any inborn magical talent of any kind. And I achieved that through, you know, the aforementioned Pegasus, and the magic swords, and then my single character, the villain, who has inborn magical talent. And somewhere between, you know, being a 1 and now, I realized that I had kind of updated Arthurian legend and wrote a fantasy novel, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. I did that. So to start, I'll introduce you to my protagonist, Jaylene Rothwell. Her father is, at our outset, just been initiated into Adalia's Royal Guard, and Jaylene is, in the prologue, which I'll read the first few pages of, Jaylene is 8 years old, and this is where that secret that she's forcing him to keep comes into play. So I'm going to start, and we'll go from there. So prologue. Seek and Find was a fun enough game, just not against Julian. Jaylene Rothwell slumped onto the 4th floor stairs of her family's home. 1 minute to catch her breath, and then she'd find a hiding place. She buried her face in her arms to muffle her panting. Sprinting across the yard and up 3 flights of stairs hadn't been fun, but it was the only way to stay ahead. Jay! Her brother's lilting tease echoed through the house. Where are you? And even that hadn't bought her much time. She stood, tossing her sable braid over her shoulder, and climbed the stairs. There was no rule against using the 4th floor. They just never did. But if Julian was going to insist on starting a search before finishing the count, as he had every time in the last 8 years, it's time she taught him a lesson. I'm coming! She hopped the creaking second-to-last step and straightened. Before her, the double doors to her parents' bedchamber stood closed, the only room off limits. The rest of the hall mimicked the one below, light walls interrupted by dark wood doors. 2 led to tiny closets, and a 3rd to a reading room with absolutely nowhere to hide. That left her father's study. She grasped the knob and paused. Her father said she wasn't to go inside without him. If she was lucky, he wouldn't be there, but what if he was and he didn't let her stay? Jay, where are you? Her brother was close. Fine, I'm going down for lunch. Sure he was. He'd used that line before, and it wouldn't work this time. With a deep breath, she opened the door. Empty. She let out the breath. Thank Heculi. Now to find a place to hide. If it came to it, she could squeeze behind the velvet settee, but there had to be something else. A bookshelf ran the length of the wall on her right, crammed to overflowing with volumes on military history, tactics, and theory. Useful for her father's career, but no good for hiding. A smaller stand stood at its end, 3 levels of personal journals, and there wasn't enough room for her to fit between that and the larger shelf. Maybe this hadn't been a good idea. She tiptoed farther into the room. The window was open, and a warm spring breeze blew inside, carrying the scent of sunflowers that mixed with the study's perpetual sense of the sage herb in old books. Her father's desk sat beneath the window, the sheets of parchment atop it, distinguishable from the light wood only by their slight fluttering movements. Maybe she could wedge under the desk. She finished crossing the room and paused. Her father's sword belt hung from the back, and the weapon's hilt was at eye level. Markings engraved the hilt, a feather in a flame. She sucked in a breath. It was the Spellblade, the weapon of the Royal Guard. Her father had been initiated into the League Protectors just over a month ago. He looked so tall and strong beside his new Pegasus. The sword's white magic had lit even the daytime sky, and her mother, excuse me, and the strength in her father's voice when he took the oath had brought tears to her mother's eyes. The blaze of the sword had filled Jaeline's dreams every night since. It was amazing and only made by the spellblade. Unbidden, she reached for the hilt. "Never touch it," her father's voice echoed in her mind. "Wielding the spellblade if you are not in the guard is forbidden." Forbidden? But her father wouldn't know, and it would only take a second. She stretched the remaining distance and grasped the hilt. Nothing happened. She sighed and started to uncoil her fingers. It was worth a try. The spellblade tingled. She stilled her hand. Maybe it would glow after all. The tingle grew to a warm hum and entered her hand, crawling up her arm to settle on her shoulder like dry cement. White light glittered at the edges of her vision. It was happening! The sword was glowing for her! Excuse me. The hum inched into her chest, going toward her heart. I'm sorry. Going toward her heart. The warmth intensified, becoming hot and then almost burning. What? Searing fire ripped through her body. She gasped, "The hilt! Let go of the hilt!" But her hand wouldn't budge. "Daddy?" The sword shook so hard. What if it tore her arm off? What if it tore her to pieces? The white light came farther into her vision. It wasn't the sword. It was her. "Daddy?" Did she even scream? The light overtook her, and she fell. So at this point, I really wanted to say, so she dies, but that doesn't happen, obviously. One second. So pause there. Chapter 1 picks up 12 years later. Jaeline is now a corpsman, lowest rank in Idalia's army, and thoroughly frustrated with the fact that she has not made more progress in the year and a half she's been in the army. So she helps rescue the princess who is traveling to Idalia to wed Idalia's crown prince, which earns her a trip back to Idalia's capital city and the palace, and a little bit of recognition that she is very, very happy about. But when she arrives back home, suddenly promotion is not her only concern. Her father pulls her and her brother aside to tell them that strange white clouds have been appearing in the eyes of seemingly random people, and that this is some kind of madness or sickness, they don't know what. And so this bond, so at the end of the prologue, now that I've completely messed up the chronology, at the end of the prologue, Jaeline actually survives by her father binds her to his spellblade illegally to save her life. And now she's dealing with this, and her resolve is to be initiated into the guard, so she will be legally bound, and her father's life, career, and their whole family won't be in danger anymore. So when her father pulls her and her brother aside and says, "I need your help," he asks Julian to swear to the blade, which is permissible, legal, but Jaeline is not okay with this. But he ends up doing it, they end up doing it, so that their father can track them through the bond and keep them safe, and generally, just have allies in this investigation. So the weeks pass, and the royal wedding gets closer, and the clouds keep appearing, and Jaeline doesn't learn enough to make her happy, and they finally do get answers, but at a terrible cost. And I'm going to pick up where they get answers in chapter 18. And we're going to meet some new people that I'll just give names for really briefly. We're going to meet Lieutenant Crompton, Falker Crompton. Jaeline's father is now captain of the guard, and Crompton is his second in command. We're going to meet Jaeline's mother, Adriana, and we're going to meet Jaeline's father's Pegasus, Aya. So let's do this. Chapter 18. Jaeline stepped out of the barracks, Julian right behind her. To the east, the sky shone a combination of red and orange. Sunrise was not far off. "I think I've said this before," Julian said, yawning, "but I liked Night Watch better." "You have said that before," Jaylene said, not breaking stride. Every morning, I think. Julian finished yawning, stretched, and made some kind of exhaling noise. Makes sense. It's been true every morning. Around them, day-watch corpsmen greeted one another and marched to where their patrols met. Julian nodded and smiled to a few, mostly female. They smiled or winked back, some even giving him come-hither looks. He stopped to exchange pleasantries with the short-haired blonde, and Jaylene kept walking. There were some things twins didn't even share. "I'll see you later, then," Julian said, giving the blonde girl a half bow and jogging to catch up with Jaylene. "Sorry about that. Shall we?" She raised an eyebrow. "How many girlfriends do you have, anyway?" "That," he said, planting a hand on her shoulder and steering her forward, "is for me to know and you to find out." "Julian, none, all right?" He lowered his voice. "I'm not stealing virtues left and right, and I'm not leading them to expect any more than I'm willing to give. It's just normal soldier-to-soldier interaction." His tone was honest. "If you say so." "Wow, thanks for the vote of confidence, sis." He shoved her shoulders. "Forward march." She elbowed him in the stomach. To the east, the sky shone a bit brighter now. The yellows and oranges like a beacon. They called to her, and Jaylene went. "Jay?" Julian tapped her shoulder. "Where are you going?" She blinked out of a stupor. Where was she going? Her patrol was due south. "I wasn't paying attention." "Clearly," Julian said, pointing. "You go that way. I go left. We meet back here tonight." She glared at his hand. "I'm aware of that," but her feet wouldn't budge. "See you—" "Look!" a voice shouted. "What's he doing?" Corpsmen stopped their swift marches and gathered ahead, blocking the sunrise. Julian lowered his arm. Well, well, what's this?" Jaylene tried to walk away. Stopping to stare at nothing instead of going to meet her patrol would earn her a reprimand. But the force from the east pulled her. "Jay!" Julian ran back to her side and grabbed her arm. "Come see!" He dragged her into the sea of corpsmen. When the wall of soldiers grew too thick for them to pass, he stopped them and pointed into the sky. "Look!" She did. A Pegasus flew toward them, but something was wrong. It flew too slowly. No, it flew fast enough, but it dodged left and right as if tossed by the wind. Only there was no wind. There wasn't even a breeze. "Impressive," Julian said, "but why?" Jaylene didn't respond. The flying horse's movements hypnotized her. Left, down, up, back. The horse went into a dive, and Jaylene bent her legs. It was Aya. "That's father. But why was he flying like that?" "What?" Julian said. "How can you are you sure? How can you tell from here?" "To me!" The line tugged at Jaylene with such force that she staggered forward. "Jay?" Julian braced his hands on her shoulders. "Are you all right?" "To me!" She stumbled forward again. Her father pulled her toward him. "He needs us." She broke free of her brother's hold and plunged forward into the sea of corpsmen. What was going on? How was he calling to her? "Father?" Somewhere behind her, sergeants shouted, trying to herd the corpsmen back to their patrols. Some moved, but others took their places, blocking Jaylene's path. She swore and barreled through them. Didn't they understand? Her father was in danger. Aya made another sickening dive. Jaylene broke through the front line of the watchers and pushed her legs to a sprint. Another dive, another swoop, reverse, forward, up, left, back. She shifted with every movement, but stayed on target. The line to her father lessened as the distance grew less. 30 feet, 25. A single whinny split the dawn, and time seemed to stop. Aya lurched to the left and down. The flap of her massive wings regained her some height, but not much. She reeled as if struck, somersaulting in midair. There was one eternal moment of stillness, and then Pegasus and rider separated. "Father!" Jaylene bent into her run, widening her gait, but it was no use. There was too much distance, not enough time. Her father landed 10 feet in front of her. He rolled once and went still, too still. "Father!" Jaylene jumped the remaining distance and sank to her knees beside him. "Daddy!" She reached for his wrist. "Please, please, don't let him be." "Jaylene!" "Thank Heculi." "Father!" She helped him start to roll over, but paused. A broken arrow shaft protruded from his neck. His arm and leg were broken, bent at odd, unnatural angles. Damn it, he'd been shot out of the sky. "Daddy, what happened?" "No time, Jaylene." His voice was weak. "Listen to me. The clouds, they're mind control. What? No, save your strength. We have to. No time, Jaylene. It's mind control. He dragged a weak breath into his lungs. And it's... Who? Jaylene grabbed his shoulders. Who is it? Damn it, she wasn't too late. She couldn't be too late. Who? Father! Julian dove to Jaylene's side. Her father's gaze fixed on him, his gray eyes dim. I'm sorry. His eyes rolled back and he fell, unmoving. Beside her, Julian sucked in a breath. Jay! Ah! He gripped his head, writhing. White covered his eyes for a moment before fading to show gray again. Jaylene's insides went hollow. It couldn't be. Her brother affected? Controlled? She grabbed her father's arm and shook. Daddy, please! She felt for his pulse, but there was no pulse. He was gone. Dead. As long as my bond is in place, the risks of swearing are minimal. The bond was gone. For the first time in 12 years, there was no connection, no knowledge of her father's existence in her mind. And Julian was only sworn to the blade. Vladimir! Crompton landed 20 feet away and leapt off his Pegasus, landing in a dead run. Vlad! He froze, his eyes locking on Jaylene. He looked to her father, and then to her brother, and then back to her, his face frozen. He's dead, Jaylene said, pointing to her father. And Julian wasn't dead, but what? Crazy? Unconscious? Broken? Crompton's eyes widened, and he nodded. He closed the remaining distance and scooped Julian into his arms. He's hurt, he said loud enough for anyone within 10 feet to hear. Jaylene stood and turned. Corman stood around them in a semicircle. Her stomach dropped. If any of this had been secret, it wasn't anymore. Head wound. Crompton planted a hand on Jaylene's back and guided her forward. Shouts pierced the night, a background to Crompton's orders for a healer to see the captain. The commotion formed a fog around Jaylene, at least around her remaining third. Part of her lay with her father, gone. Part of her lay with Julian's unconscious form. It was a miracle enough of her remained intact to move, never mind think, but move and think she did. A Pegasus landed a few feet away, and a woman dismounted and ran toward them. Is it true? Crompton nodded. Close ranks around the palace. Make sure the king and princes are safe. The woman saluted and charged back to her Pegasus. A flap of the animal's wings and they were airborne. Lieutenant! A sergeant Jaylene didn't know by name ran to Crompton's side, speaking so quickly his words blurred. Give your patrols orders for high alert, Crompton said, and send a runner to the infirmary. Tell Healer Rothwell what's happened and have her meet me in my office immediately. The sergeant hurried away, spewing commands, and Crompton guided Jaylene forward again. Footsteps pounded, horses nickered. The sounds crashed on Jaylene's ears, shaking her concentration. Before her, Corman stepped from her path, all wearing shell-shocked or panicked expressions. Finally, the line of soldiers ended. Jaylene inhaled a shaky breath, counted to 10, and released it. Was this real? She pinched the exposed skin of her arm. It stung, but nothing changed. You're awake, Crompton said, his voice quieter than it had ever been. Trust me. She nodded, unable to form words. At Crompton's prodding, she turned left, and the guard's stable came into view. Some kind of whimpering sound escaped her throat. I know, Crompton said, only a little farther. A little was doable. Left foot, right foot. The distance to the stables lessened until she was at the wall, rounding the corner, stopping at the door to Crompton's office. He pressed the hilt of his spellblade to the latch, and the door swung open. Jaylene stumbled over the threshold into the chairs on one side of the room. All right, Crompton said, laying Julian beside the desk and kicking the door closed. I don't want to say this any more than you want to hear it, but I have no choice. Your father's dead. The words pierced Jaylene as if through water. Their impact should have knocked her unconscious, but they barely pricked her skin. Yes. Crompton was silent for a long time. Now for the difficult part. You and Julian were sworn to that blade. You should both be dead. Instead, he's unconscious and you're fine. He winced. Well, not fine, but awake. Jaylene fisted her hands. Tell no one. Not her mother, not her brother, not Crompton, about the bond. Did that still apply? And the only way, Crompton ran a hand over his hair. It can't be. You'd have to be bound to your father's spellblade. She didn't move, didn't speak. Crompton watched her, the hope leaving his eyes. You are, aren't you? Yes. That one word, 3 tiny letters, ripped at Jalien's insides, tearing at the very fabric of who she was. Hells be, Crompton said, his voice hoarse. How? I saw you swear with my own eyes. Jalien's stomach tightened. So much for keeping a secret, but it wasn't a secret anymore. I did swear to the blade that night in the stables, and prompted, 12 years of keeping her lips sealed broke. She explained everything, how she'd been playing hide and seek, how she'd come across the sword, how she'd wanted to see it glow, how her father had bound her to save her life. When she finished, Crompton just stared. Jalene! He buried his face in his hands. You've just made my job very difficult. By law, I have to report this. Swearing is permissible, but this... permissible. It was that, but it was something else too. Something her father said in passing that night. It even sounded like permissible. This is illegal, and it's only a matter of time until the king finds out. He'll be executed. They won't even try to bring Julian back. Bring him back. Permissible, permissible. Reversible! Crompton looked up. What? Jalene crossed to Julian's side. She knelt and wrapped her fingers around his wrist. His pulse beat, steady, weak, but there. Swearing was reversible. Father said as much that night in the stables. Again, Crompton just stared. Girl, you're a genius! I can pass this off as a head wound. You can wake him up, and I can speed up the guard selection process. Once they take the oath, you'll no longer be bound. He clapped his hands. Perfect. Perfect. Right. Giving up the spellblade, the guard, was perfect. Though she wasn't giving it up. The future was undetermined. And if it meant her brother back safe, there was no contest. Right, Jalene said, standing. What are we waiting for then? The right time, Crompton said without hesitation. Your father's spellblade is with him still. If I waltz into the infirmary and take it, it will raise suspicion. Of course it wasn't that simple. So what do we do in the meantime? We stall. Julian won't get worse, and 3 brisk knocks came at the door. Falker! Mother! Jalene ran to the door and threw it open. Her mother swept into the office and gathered Jalene in a hug. Tell me it's not true. She backed away, hope gleaming in her eyes with the intensity of 3 suns. Tell me my husband's not... Crompton crossed to her side. I'm sorry, Adriana. No! She wrapped her arms around herself. No! How? Why? Julian! She ran to his side and knelt, shaking his shoulder. What's wrong with him? He's alive, Crompton said, but he won't wake. He was sworn to Vladimir's spellblade. What? Jalene's mother leaped to her feet. Since when? Since the night he and Jalene returned to the grounds. Crompton gave an abbreviated account of the events. But it's all right. Jalene can... All right? Her mother stepped toward Crompton. Her face went stark white and a muscle jumped in her jaw. You call this all right? My husband's dead. My son may as well be dead, and my daughter... Her jaw dropped. You're bound to your father's spellblade! Yes, Jalene's cheeks warmed. And he never told me? Vlad! Her mother tilted her face upward. Vlad, how could you do this? Crompton gripped her shoulders. Adriana, calm down. No! She ripped free, tears gleaming in her eyes. No! They'll find out. They'll execute Jalene, and Julian will die. She tilted her face upward again. I told you, Vlad! I told you not to involve our children! You bastard! She charged from the room, slamming the door in her wake. Mother, wait! Jalene moved to follow. Let her go, Crompton said, blocking her path. She needs time. She just lost her husband. Funny, Jalene said. I think I knew that already. Don't get snippy with me, Jalene. I'm trying to help. She bit off her next comment. Of course he was. He'd never done anything but help. And she repaid him by throwing petty retorts in his face. I'm sorry. I'm just... It's all right. Crompton patted her shoulder. I know how you must feel, but there's nothing we can do right this moment. Your father's funeral will be tomorrow. After the pyre, while people are distracted, we'll take the spellblade and wake up your brother, and then we'll talk to your mother so the 3 of you can start moving on. All right, Jalene said. What about between now and then? We can't take him to the infirmary. I'll keep him here. No one has access to this room but me. You'll be safe. Crompton stepped from between her and the door. Now, though, I need to go to the king. I should have gone there first, but family takes priority. Family. Jaylene dug her fingernails into her skin. She didn't have much family left at the moment. Do you want to stay here? Can I? Legally, no, Crompton said, shaking his head. Not that a minor law is anything for you to worry about. No. What was one small law compared to all the other ones she already broke? Thank you. She sank to the floor beside Julian, her body going stiff and cold. You're welcome. Crompton crossed to the door. I'll talk to the king about moving up the guard selection. And he left. All right, Julian said to the empty room. She moved closer to Julian, ran her hand over his hair. The strands caressed her skin like a familiar blanket, and his even breaths tickled her flesh. It had been years since she watched him sleep. Age changed him, as it did everyone. Unconscious, though, he was the same boy he'd been all those years ago. I'm sorry. The words were small and quiet, and just between the two of them, like so much of their lives. He was her brother, but he was more than that. He was her best friend, and she wouldn't lose him now. I'll bring you back. I promise. Their father just had to burn first.
Very well done. You mentioned that you got rid of a lot of pages.
That's pretty mild.
And when I read the novel again, I could barely see the original manuscript. Like you said, the main concepts were there. The main characters were there, but it was almost like an alternate universe characters. They weren't quite the same, things were different. Could you talk a little bit about that process of slashing and burning so many pages, and what brought you to that, and what got you through having to do that?
Don't do it, first of all. God, where to start? I realized somewhere in the mentor transitioning process no, I lied. I realized somewhere after the mentor transitioning process, after I finished writing my rough draft and sending Anne like 60-page submissions, sorry about that, that the stuff I had written in my first 2 terms was a book 1 needed to be its own book, and that the stuff I had written in my 3rd term needed to be like 2 more books, but needed to be 1 book for me to pass the program on time. And it was a really painful, difficult decision to make, knowing that I needed to have a project that could stand on its own to pass the program, but knowing also that the stuff I wrote in my 3rd term was like leaps and bounds better than the stuff I wrote in my first 2 terms. So also I had more stuff that I wrote in my 3rd term. So it came down to 60,000 words or 40,000 words to cut. Gee, let me think about this. 40, bye. So everything I wrote in my first 2 terms went, and I showed up to my mentor meeting as 4 and said, hey Anne, how do you feel about me writing a book 2 and 3 combined that I can make stand alone? And she said, well, if you think you can do it, okay. And I said, okay, good, because I've already started doing that. Didn't tell her that at the time, though, because that would have been stupid. I'm smart.
It's easier to ask forgiveness than...
Really, yeah. But I made it work, and it was a really interesting process coming up with reasons, because I have this kind of book 1 outline in my head that I want things to reflect in, when I go back and fix everything the way I want to fix it. So, but for my thesis to make it stand on its own, I really had to cut back on so much stuff that I wanted to put in there. That drove me up a wall. and I had to rewrite plot points, and oh my god. So if I were to take everything that I ever cut and print it out, I'd have like 4 books. But they're not usable, so what good is it? So yeah, that was fun.
So Jaylene,
Yeah.
do you feel that she falls under the category of strong female protagonist?
Those words make me cringe. and I'll tell you why those words make me cringe. I read this blog post article, I forget where, and if I ever find the link, I'm sure a bunch of people in this program have read it because it's one of those things that somebody will post every once in a while on Facebook. But I read this article, and it was, the beginning of it was men get to be, and then there was this list of like 30 adjectives, and women get to be strong. And I was like, that's grossly unfair. So I don't really believe in strong characters of any type, but I particularly don't believe in strong female heroines, especially not the type that are strong because they punch people in the face and really don't do much else. What I do believe in is people, and when I was writing my my final paper for Nicole Peeler's writing about popular fiction class, I realized somewhere in there that it didn't really matter what gender Jaylene was. There were very few exceptions. She could have been a guy or a random other gender that I made up, and it wouldn't have made a terrible amount of difference because I wasn't writing a woman's story or a strong woman's story or any type of woman's story. I was writing a story about a person who, wanted and needed to save her family, to protect those she loves, to be a person, not just a strong entity. And she has her moments of weakness, and I'm okay with that because she's human.
What attracted you to writing in a low magic world?
I think I wanted a challenge, and after all the challenges I've had in the program, I'm like, what was I thinking? But I liked the idea of, and I think this ties into the answer I just gave about strength, I liked the idea of the only weapons that my characters have are, well, aside from swords and the occasional magic sword, are strength, determination, guts, what you or I or anyone would have when faced with, incredible situations that are totally against, the odds are totally stacked against us. And I really wanted to play with that kind of human condition. Like, all Jaylene has at the end when she's facing the bad guy is the conviction that she's right and the knowledge that she has to protect. And I really like that idea, and I really love her for that. And it took me a while to love her. I hated her for so long. But she grew on me.
What's your advice for the ones who...
All right. And I knew I was going to get that question because it's my life to get question, so I stand there and go, ah. But knowing that I was probably going to end up with that question, I actually thought of something. Go me. And my parents are going to make a noise when I say this, but be open. There, see? Be open to suggestions. Be open to feedback. Realize that your story is not set in stone. Realize that you can make changes, and often that those changes are going to make the story better. Realize that when you put your manuscript in front of your second mentor and they ask you 2 questions that completely pull the floor up from under you, that there is a way to fix this. I had a heart attack at the end of that semester. I was like, so this, and I was, that's my plot going out the window. But I came back from that, and I feel I made it 10 times better once I got the rug back under me. So you're going to get a lot of feedback in your time here, and it's feedback is feedback. Take some of it with a grain of salt. Take all of it and look at it, and take what works for you. Take what can work for you, and do what you feel is best with it, because in the end, it's your thesis novel, your story. I'm not usually so profound.
It doesn't come easy, I'll tell you.
Why did I invite them?
We paid for the
Other
trip.
questions?
Right. tuition.
Yeah, Rose?
Oh, so I read your entire manuscript.
Yes, I know, thank you.
And I know I fangirl with you over a lot of scenes, but I wanted to know what is your favorite scene or what's your favorite moment?
Oh, my favorite moment. Okay, guys. So I get to introduce Amy's favorite character now. And she was very miffed when I told her I wasn't reading him in the thesis reading. That Crown Prince that I mentioned, Crown Prince Kylander. And he's the romantic interest who has a plot line of his own. And you know, there's a connection there, and I think this is where I realized that I had taken our Arthurian legend into account, is the whole soldier, or you know, soldier royalty romance. So I took Lancelot and Guinevere and flipped it upside down and stuck it in a pot of boiling water and whatever. So they have their moment, their first real like romantic. They have their first kiss in chapter 15, and you know, they're into it. And Jaylene, you know, shortly into it is, oh my God, what am I doing? And it's actually in Kylander's POV, so we see this after the fact. And Jaylene pulls away and says, "This can't happen. I'm sworn to protect you. You're engaged." And she walks away, puts distance between them, puts duty before love, puts duty before, not even love at this point, just before friendship, because that's really all they're supposed to be. And so the following scene is Jaylene kind of dealing with what's just happened, and she's completely torn up, like, oh my God, if anybody ever finds out about this, you know, I'll forget it, you know, and then she's thinking back on all the people that she's keeping secrets to keep alive, and you know, how all of this started with her touching her father's spell blade, which she wasn't supposed to do. And my favorite line in the book is realizing that, you know, she touched the spell blade and then she was touching Kylander. And my favorite line is 12 years later and she still touched things that didn't belong to her. And I wrote that line, I was just like, I am a genius.
Janine did say that. Came out of the room, I'm a genius.
I did, and I was like, oh, genius! Then I ran back in my room and they're like, do we know her? Yeah.
What is the most useful craft book you've read, either or in the program?
Self-editing for fiction writers was really handy. I read that this semester and that was super handy. So when you get to the point where you're revising, you say to your mentor, hey, I want to read this. But my third semester, I read this really cool, like, not what you would expect, and Anne and I were like doing a Google search at our mentor meeting, like, what, are there any books on this topic? And because I was having a hard time with my villain, and so I was looking on a book about books for villains, and so this is just a neat little tip if anybody needs help. There's this book out there called Bullies, Bastards, and Bitches. And I think it's by Jessica Page Morrell, I don't remember. If anybody wants to know who it's by, just like message me on Facebook or whatever, and I'll look it up for you. But it went through all of the like the anti-heroes and the, you know, villains and the supervillains and the difference between a villain and an antagonist, and it was really cool, useful stuff that I found really helpful in kind of motivating my villain characters. So that and self-editing for fiction writers. So
Jessica Morrell.
okay, I think I know it. Oh, then don't email me. Just ask me.
She got it faster than me.
You have internet. I forgot. What is newfangled technology? I write fantasy. There's no technology. Well, I lied for things. So.
What else? Jen?
What is the hardest part to write?
Well, the first chapter gave me hell up until about 3 months ago. I had to rewrite. I sent the book to my beta readers, and they were like, "So your first chapter?" I was like, "Yeah, I hate that chapter. What am I going to do to fix it?" But really, I struggled a lot with my ending. The last 2 chapters, and Anne said, "Well, after the final battle, you shoot just maximum of 2 chapters." I was like, 2? I can't wrap this up in 2. Don't you see all the subplots? All right, 2 it is. don't hurt me. It was killing me. I was back in February, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, what am I gonna do with these people? And I was afraid of putting Jaylene into the vulnerable role of saying I love you to Kylander. And I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna fall back on that sappy, romancy heroine thing, and And then it occurred to me, I was like, hey, this girl just like saved the world. Like, she was willing to sacrifice Kylander's life to save the world. And quite honestly, I think after that, you can say I love you. It's totally okay. I mean, and once I realized that, and then I'm writing it, and it felt right, because the story is really about her, and I was like, it needs to come from her. This is her final moment of realizing that she doesn't have to be who she thought she had to be all these years. And so, lesson there is be true to your characters and listen to them, because they tell you really important things.
I've got one more question.
Okay.
Anybody else has anything? What is the most important thing that you'll take away from the program?
Do you know the answer like right now?
Yes.
Oh, crap. You're killing me. Most important thing I will take away from the program. My degree. No.
That's fair.
Yeah, really. Fair answer. I think I have no idea. I think there's so much to take away from the program, like all the writing lessons I've learned, and all the improving I feel I've done. And I think most of all, though, I will take away an eternal sense of community, because no matter where else I go, no matter who else I end up, being a critique partner with, or writing with, or whatever, everyone who's been through this will have this experience, and at the end of the day, they're the people who are going to understand. You post in the Facebook group, like, my life is ending. So I think I just need to thank the entire program and for being there for me for the last 2.5 years. So I will take away knowing that I had a great time here, and I learned so much here, and that I met some of the most amazing people while I was here, that I will have that for the rest of my life. So thanks.
Okay, thank you.
No, you're not going to. No crying. There's no crying.
No crying.
No crying with the MFA.
Baseball?